Welcome back to the Weightlifting.ai Podcast. I'm your host, Max Ada, and I'm joined by Joshua Gibson. Today, we are coming from sunny Calgary, Canada. We just got done doing a Team Ada client-centric strength training course for the Good Life gym chain up here, and it was really fun. We are going today to talk about an interesting topic that Josh had an idea for, so if it's bad, it's his fault. But this is a topic where I think it's good for kind of, I don't want to say people starting coaching or people getting into coaching. And, it's like I always like these kind of things because it gives us a chance to sort of maybe give some experience and share some old man wisdom, veteran wisdom. So today we're going to talk about basically, I don't know if it's the 5 top things that coaches make as mistakes, the 5 mistakes coaches make, but definitely the top mistakes that we see coaches making as far as it pertains to weightlifting. So with that said, Josh, what is your first top coach's mistake?
Yeah, and I think I introduced this idea to you, and I was spitballing and thinking about very specific ideas, right? Very specific, like...
You being super specific? That's interesting.
I was being hyper specific. I was like a competition block for podcasting. And I was thinking about how people pick the wrong exercises or use exercises too long or programming mistakes. And it's like, okay, Max told me to think a little bit more broadly, and it's turned into something like mistakes of execution or a mistake that is an error in execution. So generally coaches they'll be well-intentioned, they'll have a decent framework or plan in place, but the execution of that plan, the decision making that comes on the back end of some sort of change, some sort of observation or result, they kind of err in how they react to it. So they're not able to execute when in reality there's a lot of performance potential. They can't realize it. So it's like having a great athlete, really gifted, super muscular, really athletic, and then they just don't show up. It's like you have everything but the execution of the plan. So I think that's kind of the number one mistake.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I would agree that that's definitely a problem. I think a lot of young coaches, I would almost describe it more like putting the pieces together. It's like you've got a great program or you've got a great environment or a great gym, but the cohesion between those things is the execution, how well you nail the little details, right? Are you doing the whole program? Are you, putting a thoughtful intent into every rep and coaching it, all the way? Are you making sure your athletes have all the things they need sort of dialed in? I would say for me, the top one is the idea of wishful thinking. And this comes down to, it can apply to many things, but the idea of wishful thinking is that you've decided on an idea or an outcome, and you think that, okay, I know that because if we do X, Y, and Z exercise, if we do, panda pulls, then it's gonna do this, it's gonna have this effect, and you don't know that. And you just believe that that's true, and you've maybe gotten to a point even where you've convinced yourself that that's the outcome, that's going to be the outcome. Like if we do this magical exercise, it's gonna have this effect on my athlete. And because you're so focused on that wishful thinking, you kind of block the idea out that you could be wrong. And so you go around writing programs, coaching people, informing people of stuff, and you end up in a situation where you're just going down the wrong road and you never actually stop to say, hey, is this actually gonna happen? You don't have this situation in front of you where you can say, hey, this guy did something wrong. I don't know. Did the outcome come out the way I expected? If it didn't, my initial assessment was incorrect. And so getting into that place of wishful thinking that things are going to work out that way or they work out the way I expect them to, definitely a huge problem for beginner coaches.
Yeah, and I would say that wishful thinking and the setup for an inability to execute can go hand in hand, right? So you have the plan in place. It's like, this is the most perfectly distilled and constructed program. I know it's going to work. And then you just can't figure out how to execute on that to actually realize it. And maybe it was bad in the first place, right? Maybe it was, maybe you're trying to run a marathon for a weightlifting meet. Obviously doing some sort of like really extensive endurance training isn't going to be conducive to lifting the most in the snatch and clean and jerk. But I think generally coaches are pretty close, and it's like, how do you make decisions off of information? And if you kind of slough off this idea of wishful thinking, and you take each outcome as it comes, right? And you're kind of not indifferent, but you can take it, integrate it, iterate on it. That's when you can kind of create this process by which you can get closer and closer to what the person needs, closer and closer to identifying every individual aspect of the program or training environment that they need to be successful, and then craft that for them. But it comes with, again, being able to execute or figure out how to execute, and being somewhat agnostic to the outcome. Whereas, slight deviations don't throw you so off course that you're shaken up for a week after the fact.
Yeah. So what would you say is your next one?
So I think another mistake is trying to fit a square peg into a round hole with respect to culture. So we want to, the coach comes in, we're going to train hard, we're going to max out, and it turns out we have a bunch of people who are kind of recreational, they just want to have fun, they have really stressful jobs, they have families, they have a lot going, but you want it to be big Monday, big Wednesday, and big Friday, with technique sessions kind of sprinkled in between, and there's no compatibility there. And it's not saying it's one or the other. It's not you have to get away from heavy days. But it's thinking that, like, because heavy days are optimal, that's what should be done, or you should be doing, and then creating a culture around that would support really intense training, which is maybe you blast up the Slipknot, maybe turn down the lights, you light some candles, satanic rituals start happening, and then you max out, right? Instead of like, okay, we have some pictures of like Lasha on the wall, we have the competition calendar up, we're going to do some percentage work today, and you can push it if you feel good, and it's just a more relaxed kind of fun environment for people who want to treat it like that.
Okay, interesting. I think that's a good question. My question would be, do you feel you see people oftentimes trying to create the wrong culture and thinking they're trying to create the wrong culture in the gym that they have, or that people are not able to create a culture and attract the type of person they want for it?
Yeah, I would say it's probably a little bit of both, but I would say that people, it is tough to create a culture, right? Because you have to be able to identify what you want as a coach, because again, a coach who's super hardcore, loves really aggressive training, loves pushing people, wants to coach Olympians, I don't know how well they would do with just coaching people who do CrossFit too and weightlift to supplement that. So it's being able to identify the culture you want, being able to see that as like a realistic possibility, not wishfully thinking that it's going to happen, and then being able to execute on it, to where you can organize something, you can drive the price in a direction that's going to attract the people you want, right? If you live in a college town, having maybe a more affordable price to get more college students, possibly more athletes. If you live in a place where there's just a ton of money and that is maybe the priority, or having people who are more recreational, like being able to navigate those smaller details to construct a culture by which people are attracted to it.
Yeah, I would say, so to add on to that, I would say my next big topic or big area is, and this is kind of a little more broad, but not establishing a sustainable course in this process. And that really comes down to business. It's a matter of, if you're going to be a weightlifting coach professionally, then you're also going to be a business owner, right? And you also have to function in that capacity. And the reality is, the sad reality for a lot of you is going to be, is that the business side of it is 10 times more important than your ability as a coach. Yeah. Because if you can't get anyone to come train in your gym, or you can't make any money, you're not going to be a coach very long. So it's super important that you understand even just the most basic aspects of running a business, promotion, marketing, all sorts of, there's such a myriad of things there. The second kind of caveat to that is, as far as creating a sustainable environment, it's super important that you create, along with that culture, the boundaries around the sport and what you give to people and what you do, and your personal life, right? It's so easy, and you see it all the time. People talk about the idea of the gym is our family and the team is our family and all these things. And some people are fine with that, and some people can balance those things. Others have a really hard time with those boundaries. And what can often happen is you just turn into this thing where either as a coach, you're you're just giving way too much of your energy and time to the gym and to people who may be recreational, who at the end of the day, like, they ask you to show up for more sessions, and you're kind of bending over backwards because it's your business and you're doing these things, and ultimately you end up burning yourself out. Or potentially worse, it can just implode on itself if you don't have the ability to sort of segregate your business life, your professional life, and your personal and home life.
Well, and speaking from personal experience, you can become resentful because you give so much to it, and then when someone says, well, I can't afford it, it's like, what do you mean you can't? Like, I thought we were developing this like long-term plan to take you where you want to go to qualify for nationals or finals, and suddenly it's like, yeah, but and you realize the imbalance was far on your side, and that, again, the wishful thinking and the story wasn't compatible with, it is a business and people are doing it until they can't do it.
Yeah, right? It's also important to note that, like, establish yourself, put yourself in a position of creating balance there, right? Be a great leader, be a great coach, be invested in people's lives, uplift them. But at the same time, you have to be okay with people living their own lives. And if they decide after 3 years of lifting with you, or 5 years, or whatever, understand there's an expiration date to everything, and that can expire and it can end, and those people can move on, and that's fine. And you can't sit there holding on to resentments if you feel like someone left you for whatever, a better coach or something, because it's the nature of this game. So creating that balance, creating those boundaries is really important, I think.
Yes, I think my last mistake, and this is more a broad mistake that's probably applicable to everyone, but it's focusing too much and putting too much of your energy and value in everything external to yourself, right? So what we're talking about is these people come in, you give them a ton, and then you expect a lot, or you put so much investment to them, and then when it's not realized, again, you become resentful, or you get upset, and maybe there's some business transaction that doesn't, again, there's like so much stock placed into things external to you, and that can be so fleeting, or it can be so fickle, or it can be really rewarding and uplifting. It can be all of that, but you can't decide when it is or when it isn't. So I think being able to just kind of like maintain your composure, interact with whatever's happening, and then make decisions on the back end, which I think is kind of the thread here with all of the mistakes. As it's like, how can you react to what's happening?
Maybe it's just mistakes we've made.
Well, and as we're talking,
everybody's going to watch this and be like, I don't have any problems with those things.
I've never done that. But yeah, I would say that those are things I've definitely thought about, and for myself, all things that I focused on improving on, executing, as he's mentioned, not being wishful with your thinking, creating the right culture, not being overly all things, I've not done well, but work to do better.
Yeah, I would say for me, the final point, it's kind of a toss-up. I would say the final point is really, I don't know how to exactly describe this, but like, have a plan as a coach, and I don't mean like a training plan or a program, but like, have a definitive long-term plan for what that career of coaching looks like. Give yourself, maybe at the beginning of every year, the end of every year, establish like, hey, this is the year, this is what we're going to focus on in the business, in the coaching process, this is what I'm going to do as far as like continuing education for myself. If you have a plan and you can integrate into that plan things that allow you to stay interested in the sport and invested, how many coaches are there probably out there? You're grinding away, you've got 14 remote clients or 10 remote clients and 12 in person, or like, it's just barely enough to survive. Where maybe you can take some time and say, hey, there needs to be times within the year where I'm doing maybe another job to earn some extra money to alleviate some of the financial hardship of being a coach. Maybe that's not the case, but you should also plan in things to keep you excited about the sport you're doing. Maybe that's adding an extra day on to a national level trip to watch a session, or giving yourself the time to meet other coaches at nationals, schedule times to meet and talk to other coaches and stay invested and stay learning, or even going to like a world championship or a Pan Am championship or some kind of large event that you don't have someone that you're coaching at, because it gives you a chance to kind of fall in love with the sport again and stay invested in the entirety of what you're doing. You can kind of continue to rekindle some of the things that maybe you really loved about it when you started, that, you know, as you get older or as you get more experienced or as you get beaten down, you know, coaching so much, you can kind of capture some of that again, and it'll really excite you.
Right.
It's kind of your job as a coach to stay excited about the people in front of you, but also about the sport.
Yeah.
You know, and this can even go further to say, like, in the day-to-day business of coaching, maybe it's important to think about the language you use to describe things in the sport. It used to be that people would talk about the drugs all the time. It was like everyone was obsessed with drugs. Everyone's obsessed with the fact that the world is cheating or whatever. And, you know, you talk negatively about all of those people. Or maybe you're hyper-competitive and you talk negatively about the competitive aspect of, like, oh, we got to beat this team from Apple Valley, right? We're going to crush those rich kids across the lake with our ragtag group of misfits we have here at Camp Tonawanga. But yeah, it's like, don't maybe put that sense of negativity constantly into your day-to-day training or day-to-day coaching, day-to-day job, but find time and make time and find energy and money to do things that are just outside of your day-to-day job that keep you excited and interested in the sport. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I think to your point about planning and trying to know when you're going to make those choices to intentionally try to level up what you're doing is like, you kind of get, it's easy to get caught in this rut of, if you do what you always do, you'll get what you always get.
Yeah.
And
Louis Simmons.
Is that what he said?
I don't know.
Yeah, circa 2004. But you kind of have this expectation that, like, oh, eventually something's going to take off. Someone's going to walk in. There's going to be this huge opportunity. When you're not making the opportunity happen, the probability of it happening is so tiny. So if you're not actively building something else or building into something else or connecting with people who can help you figure that out, you just, like, you can't have an expectation that it's going to take off and you're going to be coaching 60 to 100 people and have this huge empire, because you're not executing on the actions that will make that happen. So it's great to be in the gym all the time, every day, watching lifts, improving your coaching eye and coaching ability, but, like, don't expect to just blow up magically because suddenly you've seen tens of thousands of reps and no one else has.
Yeah. Cool. That's a great talk. I think that's a good topic. Hopefully you guys found some value in that. This was the Weightlifting.ai podcast. If you want to get in touch with myself for remote coaching, teamada.com. If you want to follow me on Instagram, max_ada. If you want to try the greatest weightlifting app ever made, probably ever will be made, it is Weightlifting.ai. Check it out. Josh, where can they find you?
Yeah, so Max and I did write a book. If you guys are interested in checking that out and improving your snatch or integrating some of the concepts into the Weightlifting.ai that you're currently using, that's called The Weightlifter's Guide to the Snatch. That's at Weightlifting House. You can use my code PHILWL, PHILWL, for 10% off all of their products. Same with onxstraps.com. You can find me on Instagram at Josh_PhilWL, philosophicalweightlifting.com. Back to you, Max.
We will see you next time, probably from Calgary.